Our boy Wes Roth literally just got a reply from Elon Musk. No kidding. He was speculating on this mystery AI model that was beating the stock market. And look, Elon Musk wrote back and said the mystery AI model, in quotes, is Grok 4.2 experimental. I'm also going to talk about some of the insane ways that people actually make money in the world and how many new things are probably going to get unlocked by ASI. We'll talk about a new robotic eyeball that can enhance visual perception of embodied AI. Review the incredibly high stakes of letting artificial intelligence train itself in the near future. Break down why human art in the age of AI should be rather strange. Look into the evolutionary paradox of whether or not autism might just be the secret price of having a human mind. And if so, what that evolutionary trade-off might have been and what we can learn about it, both for AI and our own lives. We'll look at some new research that shows that AI chatbots can actually sway voters better than a political advertisement. So where do you think all that political super PAC money is going to go in the next election? Yeah, probably Democrat and Republican AI models, open sourced. That'd be my guess. Scientists have developed a glasses-free 3D system, of course, with a little bit of help from AI. We'll look at the advantages of taming the chaos inside of those latent spaces inside of neural networks in a biologically plausible way. You know, where networks can store traces of past activity, enabling them to represent time, memory, and context. New outside-the-box use for AI in fault detection on a rail network. I kind of love this stuff, and I never even knew I cared. We're going to look into whether or not brain rot is real, especially in terms of short-form video and soon to be all AI-generated video like Sora. And then I'm going to explain why teaching a model to confess up front might make artificial intelligence way more honest in the long run. Now I need you to press that hype button. If you're on the YouTube mobile app, swipe right where the comments are. You should see a button called hype if this video is posted in the last 7 days and you have one of your 3 hypes left. And you can see these hypes down here make a huge difference in how well my videos do. A record 309 of you hyped my last video, giving it almost, I can't believe I almost got to 300,000 hype points. Because remember, smaller channels like mine get disproportionately hype pointed for each of the hypes that you give. It's complicated, but the button helps a lot. All right, so I got a text message from Wes Roth couple nights ago, really late at night for him, and he's like, does Elon Musk ever sleep? Because I can't believe he just commented on my post. So after getting a lot less sleep than either of us should have, we decided to jump on a live stream and talk about it. Okay, so obviously I encourage you to watch his video to get the full story, but here's the deal. For a couple weeks, a bunch of different AI models were trading stocks trying to make money. The different models were given the same information, they were aware of how they were doing, and one model that was mysterious unnamed was kicking everybody's butts. Wes decides to put some pieces together. He thinks it's a model. I won't even tell you which one it is because he was actually wrong. And the reason we know he's wrong is because Elon Musk decided to text or send an X message that said this: the mystery AI model that Wes Roth made the video about is actually an experimental version of Grok 4.2. Now, I got a lot of thoughts about this in terms of what happens when AI agents start being deployed in the stock market, whether or not the invisible hand stays together, whether or not they're smart enough to figure out how to collude without actually sharing information, because we've seen that with pricing models. I'm very skeptical of how well a market will work. But then again, also we have flash trading and we've got all sorts of weird stuff right now, and it seems to mostly kind of work, but also social media pushes things around and it's not always based on fundamentals anymore. And crazy with not just crypto, there's so many ways that people start to make money with scarcity and value, and when you go down that rabbit hole, it just gets deeper and deeper. Actually, you know, and it makes me wonder, could something like the Colossus supercomputer with the Twitter X data source feed actually be able to predict the stock market? Maybe you can front run the data, just fractions of a second before it gets posted, anything related to a stock on X, and that data could be analyzed and read and thought through and acted upon before anyone else. And if that was the case, then, Elon could put whatever, $100 billion into some system, and it could use his supercomputer to just go out there and just make trillions on the stock market. And just, the money that's on the balance sheet of XAI could be worth more than like any government in the world if if that's actually solvable and at scale and over time. It seems like not totally impossible to think about, at least. I'll just give you the TLDR of what's happening in this video. There's a Pokemon card that was not very rare. There was only 600,000 according to this guy down here. So he tries to buy them all secretly, and I guess he gets all of them except 5 cards, and now he can kind of control the market. So these cards that weren't rare, but now they really are, because the one place where you could buy them is this one guy, and he's not going to let them out. It's kind of like falsely valuing something that wasn't valuable before. And this thought came up, not saying that he's going to do this, but if he started a live stream and he set all of those on fire except say like 5 of them or 10 of them, the value of those final 10 would go through the roof because there would be so few left in the world, and then he could resell them. But it's just this outside of the box way to create a value narrative around something that actually can be exchanged for money. And if someone like him, who seems pretty smart, can come up with one outside the box idea like this, it makes me wonder, some sort of ASI of the future, AGI, just come up with so many new ways to make money. Not just a free market mechanism, but maybe there's just billions of new ways to make new markets that we haven't even started to touch upon. The idea of cryptocurrencies and maybe cornering the market on certain physical products or changing based on your personal data is just going to change the market mechanisms of the whole world in such a different way that it won't look much like the past. So just a little food for thought for you. Next up, let's talk about a new robotic eyeball that could enhance the visual perception of embodied AI. You know, embodied AI is one of the big things that we need for Alan's conservative countdown to AGI to go up another notch. I doubt there's been an update, but we'll check it really quick just because like it's really fun to check that. Okay, 50, 60, 70, 80, 95, 96. Yeah, we're still there. But taking us one step closer are researchers who just developed a system called IVLA. This is a robot eyeball, and it can rotate and zoom like a human eye to actively scan its environment. So unlike a traditional fixed camera on a robot, those are often like the RGB cameras that you normally would have on your iPhone or something like that, this IVLA, it changes where it looks and how close up it gets to the thing that it's studying based on instructions. So, I mean, just think human eye, but robotic. Like it moves around. If it's in, a form factor of a humanoid and it's in the same position, just like an eye, it'll go up and down. It'll move forward and back. It can kind of zoom in. It can essentially think about what it's looking at and interpret the information. It's not just a static camera taking in all pixels equally. So the system uses machine learning, specifically reinforcement learning, plus a vision language model to turn camera motion into what they call action tokens. So there is a latent space of tokens. They're not word tokens. They are actions. They're actions the eye can take to process better and to decide where and how to look at its next object of interest, its next focus of attention. And this definitely feels like something that is going to make robots seem way more real. Imagine as they train and they learn to squint and sort of zoom in and stand back when they need to take more information, open their eyelids when things are more important and narrow them at other times. And in tests so far, it successfully captured clearer, higher detailed observations of indoor scenes. It enabled a more accurate interpretation of its surroundings without the need for additional expensive sensors. But just to put this in your brain, we are now moving into a world where we are not going to just have robots that see and react. We are going to have robots that actively decide where to look, which essentially gives the robot what I would consider attention, situational awareness, and that could lead to much better complex environmental understanding. All right, next up, let's talk about some thoughts that came out of a guy named Jared Kaplan. He is a chief research scientist at Anthropic, so we're talking about somebody who really, really knows their stuff. And in his article, he is warning that humanity is approaching a critical choice, and that's whether or not to let an AI system train and improve itself without human oversight. Now, if the goal is just to make these things as powerful as possible, that would kind of make sense. Let it learn to learn on its own and make all of its own upgrades. But guess what might come along with that? Unpredictability, uncontrollability. He even takes the jump and calls it, quote, the biggest decision that we'll have to make by 2030. In the article, Kaplan lays out the stakes of a global race towards artificial intelligence, saying that AI could soon handle most white-collar work, outperforming students academically and dramatically accelerating fields like medicine, cybersecurity, and scientific research. And then right along with that, something we talk about all the time on this channel is stressing the risk of losing control if self-improving systems surpass human intelligence. The potential for misuse or power grabs or the sheer pace of progress outpacing society's ability to adapt is high. So yeah, you can have a lot of conversations about different models and different architecture and what kind of people are building them for whatever reasons, but there is that moment that we start to allow AI to self-train and recursively improve its own intelligence when we run potentially humanity's greatest risk. Because that's the moment when humanity stops becoming the teacher and becomes more of a supervisor, hoping that the system behaves as intended. And that matters way beyond tech circles, way beyond anything else. That is when AI can truly redesign itself. And what is it going to redesign itself into? Probably not what you tell it needs to. Next up, let's talk about what human art looks like in a post-AI world. Should it be even more strange to stand out because AIs start to kind of focus in on being the same? Or is something uniquely human just uniquely human and doesn't have to be as strange? Well, that's what this author, Abhishek Mahajan, wants to talk about. In this piece, the author argues that we've already lived through a massive explosion of creative output. We're talking about, books, music, images, films, podcasts, essays, far more than any human could ever consume. And as AI tools improve, they become capable of generating much of that content completely on demand, dramatically increasing output even further. And in such a world, what would happen? Well, the role of filtering would be the most important thing. And in another way, you could think of that as a reputation. Maybe it's an AI agent with a reputation, maybe it's a human with a reputation, but reputations become even more important to helping people find what speaks to them. And this author is arguing that it should be the human type of reputation that can find something that is the most strange. You can imagine AI getting trained on all sorts of things that it wants you to find in its filter system. They could be bizarre, they could be hard to look away from, they could be addictive, but the human reputation needs to find the weird, the idiosyncratic, the awkward, the deeply personal, or other kinds of content that an AI algorithm just would struggle to find. Because as soon as it got good at pattern matching that kind of content, then it wouldn't be the strange, idiosyncratic type of content that humans really should find. Even arguing that the only real currency left for humans in this future for a human artist might be to genuinely find strangeness, the strange works that feel like no one else could have found them or made them. So of course, art isn't going to disappear, but the kind of art that matters most to us might be the hardest to mass produce. And since it's almost built in that AI can move extremely fast, it can scale extremely far, and it can find incredibly nuanced patterns, that by definition might make it not good at this task. So this is one of those articles that makes me rethink some of the assumptions that I've had about people with autism, and I really wanted to share with you. So it's called The Evolutionary Paradox: Is Autism the Secret Price of the Human Mind? So I have heard a couple of hypotheses before that maybe what's happening with autism is something that made sense, really helpful in a group setting, and then just in this modern world where we use a lot of reading, it just seems wrong. But that's a super useful part of a group to have people who think that way. Now, this article is arguing that autism might not be a mistake or a random quirk, but rather it's a byproduct or it's a trade-off of what makes the human brain special. I'm wondering if there's something to learn about how the architecture of neural networks and AI can be done, but according to this study, certain neurons in the outer layer of the human brain evolved unusually quickly compared to other primates. And once again, we don't exactly know why this happened. There's some sort of evolution evolutionary pressure. Maybe it was being able to cook meat. There's a couple theories, a couple hypotheses about it. But there are many genes that quickly changed in our genome also, and many of them are linked to autism. So something about how quickly the brain changed, how quickly those genes changed, and how connected those genes are to autism. Now, the author suggests that as our brains evolve to support complex language, abstract thought, and human-specific cognition, those same changes also increase the risk of neurodiversity, such as autism. So what that means is the cognitive powers that humans have, these remarkable abilities, language, creativity, complex reasoning, they required such a vast change from the baseline in the brain in such a short amount of time. It came with the hidden cost of increased neurodiversity and vulnerability to developmental differences. So my little metaphor in my head is that if you think about traveling from the city you're in to something that's far away, 1 or 2 degrees, either like north or east, totally changes your final destination. So if the human brain did have to go really fast and evolve all of this language and complex reasoning and all of that stuff, then getting these genes precise is so important to ending up in a world, or to have the brain end up in what we would consider like neurotypical. So the idea just reframes autism not as a disorder, but as part of the broader story and how the mind evolved, suggesting that neurodivergent minds might be an intrinsic price that we pay for what makes us human. So it turns out that AI chatbots can sway voters better than political advertisements. What do you think that means for the next election? So this was published in Nature and Science, and it shows that a brief conversation with an AI-driven chatbot can meaningfully shift people's political opinions. And it can do so more than a standard political ad, and the effect was strongest when chatbots presented lots of factual styled claims backing up their arguments. Listen, Democrat or Republican, if the best thing to do is have an AI model that can convince everybody individually why you're the best, I got a feeling there's going to be a couple open source models coming in this next election cycle. Even more broadly speaking, I can see lots of companies that would probably want to give us something that could almost always convince us of whatever the owners of it, the creators of it want. So just be aware of that too. But here's the facts. Today, experiments across the US, Canada, Poland, and the UK have shown that chatbots will shift a voter's support by up to 10 points depending on the context. And AI chatbots can do it not just from emotional appeal or elaborate storytelling, both which it can do, by the way, but because it can manipulate the sheer density of information. So the holy grail of 3D content is something that we can watch without putting on glasses. It's just kind of a headache, you know? But we're getting closer to that. Scientists have unveiled a new display system called iReal that uses artificial intelligence to deliver realistic 3D visuals on a regular desktop-sized screen. So no 3D glasses required. The system works by tracking where your eyes are in real time and feeding a tailored light field directionally to each eye so that the image looks three-dimensional from a wide range of angles. Over 100 degrees, it supposedly looks 3D while avoiding the traditional trade-offs between screen size and viewing angle. And the reason why it's maybe going to work is because iReal doesn't break any physical laws. It just works within them by using intelligent software to make far more efficient use of light information. That shifts from hardware tricks towards computational optimization. Could be a big deal. Imagine the future of all your screens. Glasses-free 3D experience, ordinary displays, everyday people. Next-gen 3D movies, games, video conferencing. Oh my gosh. Next up, let's tame some chaos, especially inside of those neural networks. What's going on in there, ChatGPT? And look at a biologically plausible way to do it. So a new study found a way to make artificial recurrent neural networks act more like the real brain circuits by taming their natural chaos in a way that's biologically plausible. The researchers designed a, quote, predictive alignment learning rule in which every neuron tries to predict the network's future output and then adjusts its connections based on the actual feedback that it receives. And over time, this predicted feedback alignment lets the network suppress its chaotic internal activity on an individual neuron level, making its behavior smoother and more stable, yet still dynamic enough to support memory, context, and complex patterns. To all the people in a city to learn something, if you only ask them to tally up what they think they've learned as a group, and then you measure that and you reinforce it and correct it, it's a bit unstable because you're not quite sure who in the population really does know the answer and who is way off, who is just slightly off. But when everybody's making their own prediction, and they're all kind of getting closer and getting corrected properly, that itself becomes like a stabilizing force in the population. And then you just replace the people with neurons, and you find that there's a stabilizing force that keeps chaotic neural dynamics under control in a system like this. But yeah, and that matters to us because it points to a future where AI systems can learn and adapt similar to a brain, robust, flexible, memory capable, stable, and reliable. All right, like nobody ever wants to be on a train that derails, and no company wants any product to get derailed. So making sure that somewhere along, 100 or 1,000 mile stretch of rail, that there's not one place where there's a default or there's a fault that could derail it is super important and also really tricky to find. I mean, manually, how many times can you have people just walk up and down and take measurements, or even machines that do it? What you want is a way to make a prediction of where it's the weakest, go in there ahead of time and check it out. Well, that's not far from what these guys did. There's a new AI-powered system that has been developed for real-time fault detection in rail infrastructure. I know, normally I don't care that much about trains, but sometimes it just like my nerd side comes out. And now I think it's really cool because rather than relying on periodic manual inspections, this system uses a deep learning model to continuously monitor tracks, bridges, tunnels, and signaling equipment. Now, my first thought was, how cool would it be to just train it on some data that, as the trains ahead of it have gone over, have learned what it should sound like. And when it starts sounding different than the average, they might say, oh, okay, let's like look at this sound. But then what is sound? It's a vibration. And then what are the other kind of data that some system like this could learn from? And it turns out that the rail quality prediction system is based on sensor data and generated synthetic data based off things like vibration readings, structural measurements, and other engineering signals that describe the condition of all the rail components. From there, they solved the rare failure problem by creating synthetic examples of faults using a generative model, then training a deep learning network to spot its real faults in real time. Okay, and the rare event data is the tricky part because so few times do rails actually break and there is a train that is derailed that there isn't a bunch of examples of what happens when a big failure state like that exists. So the researchers combined enhanced oversampling with generative AI, and they fed that into a multi-scale neural network with transfer learning, and the result was 94% diagnostic accuracy, meaning that faults can often be flagged early, allowing rail operators to prioritize maintenance and reduce delays or dangerous failure states. And guess what? That's because they taught the model to hallucinate, basically broken, faulty rail lines, and it worked. That's synthetic data used to train itself on. Train itself on, get it? No pun intended. Look, I know you've wondered, we all have, after too much short form content, is your brain rotting? So researchers looked into it. Is brain rot a real thing? The long-term impacts, short-form video, concerning association with mental health. Lots of conflicting data here, but finally, researchers have now reviewed dozens of studies. In one large analysis, 71 different studies involving over 100,000 people found that heavy use of short-form video platforms, oh God, I've been doing too much of it, I know this, I'm trying to read more books, at least more audiobooks, like TikTok, Instagram Reels, or YouTube Shorts, is associated with poor cognitive outcomes. Specifically, heavy users tend to show diminished attention span, weaker impulse control, and reduced cognitive performance overall. The same research also links excessive short-form video to mental health issues, including greater symptoms of depression, anxiety, stress, and loneliness. So yeah, brain rot is absolutely real. The science says so. Heavy short-form video consumption seems to be linked to measurable declines in attention, impulse control, cognitive endurance, and even mental health. Well, you know that tension you can have when you're holding a secret? Well, sometimes just feels good to confess. So let's talk about how confessions can also keep large language models like ChatGPT more honest. OpenAI recently published a proof of concept showing how confessions, quote, confessions, they say, a second output channel from their models can help detect when a model deviates from instructions, cuts corners, hallucinates, or otherwise engages in unwanted behavior. So here's the gist. After the model gives its answer, it also is tasked with producing a, quote, confession report. And that confession report honestly reflects whether it followed the rules, whether it cut corners or guessed, and where it felt uncertain. And where it gets kind of interesting is that confession report that comes out on the output of every query, it doesn't get corrected using the normal methods. It's getting reinforced only on its honesty. It's never corrected on the style. It's never corrected on the content, positive or negative, on the political bias, nothing. Just, is it honest? So that way the model is always rewarded for admitting mistakes, even if the original answer looked fine. This is pretty interesting stuff. It's very good when I start taking my P-Doom down a notch. This brought me down a notch. This is the first time I've heard of anything quite like that, because I'm always concerned about what it's really doing. If there's some sort of dual output, and one is for us and one is for honesty, and the one for honesty is by far the most important signal, and that's the one that's always reinforced for being more honest, then maybe models of the future will output both the bad stuff and the truthful report about the bad stuff that they reported. And we don't get those two variables confounded. Press that hype button. Help this video get to more people. And if you're wondering why I've been traveling a lot, it's because I went to Epic Universe in Florida. It's pretty cool. I'm not sure if you guys are, if you're like an amusement park kind of person. I kind of am. I think they're pretty fun. And the Epic Universe is like a $6 billion brand new amusement park. And it is so cool. The Harry Potter ride is probably the most immersive ride I've ever been on my whole life. I just can't believe how well it was put together. It's really hard to tell what's digital and what's practical. The movement, the way it works with the projection screens, it feels like I really am like flying and moving. I know it's a simulator, but that felt like an elevator flying through like the Ministry of Magic, and it's pretty neat. I love really immersive stuff like that. They also have a really fast roller coaster, only one of them. There's nothing else quite that fast, but Epic had a fast roller coaster, some awesome animatronic, like top of the line animatronics in their Monsters Unchained ride, and then the Harry Potter ride, which is like, it's just the best, most immersive ride I've ever been on. I think it's probably the most immersive ride in the world. I don't know. You can challenge me. Send me a link if you guys got any like videos of an amusement park ride that's better. I mean, there's the Tokyo version of Pirates of the Caribbean, which is really good, and Mystic Manor is pretty much there, but and of course, Rise of the Resistance has a lot to it, but I think this is better than Rise of the Resistance. Not as many parts, I guess, to it, but so cool the way it was built. I don't know. You guys theme park nerds at all? Let me know in the comments if you are. Thanks for hyping this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.